educated women don't last in marriages. And the reason why they don't last in marriages is because they take their education home with them. You're a CEO at your job, then you want to get home, you want to be a CEO in your house. That's the reason why a lot of marriages are not working out these days. Welcome to the Safe Space Chats podcast with Madam Speaker. Hi, my name is Perseverance Maremeni, also known as Madam Speaker, also known as the CEO of Self-Love. On this podcast, we are creating a safe space for ourselves through heart-to-heart conversations, encouraging others to do the same. Just because we don't believe in the same things, we don't like the same things, we're not interested in the same things, it does not mean that we cannot coexist. So this is a safe space for you to exist even when you are different and unique. Welcome to the Safe Space Chats podcast with Madam Speaker. My name is Perseverance Maremeni, also known as Madam Speaker, also known as the CEO of Self-Love. Today, I'm not going alone as usual, you guys. You know that. Mazalwan. I have another Mzalwani sitting right across me today, and I'm going to allow her to introduce herself. Hey, Sissy.
Hi, sis.
How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me today. So I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name is Mutondi Ramaru. I'm from Mashamba village. Yay!
Stand up, Mashamba. That's good.
On the map. So I grew up there and then went to varsity like most of people do. And then in Bloem. And then I came back to Joburg and that's where I started working. And then I do a lot of things, with my life, which maybe we'll get into.
Sure.
I'm also married to a wonderful husband and I have one son. Yes, so I think that will encapsulate everything about myself.
Yeah. For those who don't know, I'm also from Mashamba village. So Mutondi Ramaru is my home girl and my cousin. Can I claim you as my cousin?
Yes.
Of course. Yes. I can claim her as my cousin. And the reason why I wanted us to sit and have this conversation today, Mutondi, is because in as much as maybe we can touch here and there on, upbringing and stuff, conversations that we've had so many times in the past. But the one thing that actually made me want to fetch you and bring you here is so that we can speak to, ladies about doing well for yourself. Because I feel like to a certain degree, there's a lot of self-sabotage with us ladies because we feel like, you know what, if I'm too much, then I'm not going to be desirable. If I'm too, below average, then I'm going to attract a lot of junk. And I feel like in as much as we can never really say that we've mastered the art of just living, but, sharing information and learning from each other's, ways, I do believe that we can become better people and we can do better. So going all the way back to you growing up at Mashamba. I'm just going to act as if I don't know how Mutondi was raised because I'm from the same village, okay?
Yeah.
But just take us through growing up in the villages, Mashamba.
Okay, so for those who don't know Mashamba, okay, a lot of you don't. It's a very small village. I don't know the population, but I mean, it's nothing to write home about. So I grew up like other kids playing in the streets. I was fortunate that at least I had working parents. So my upbringing was, a bit on average or a little bit above average. And I also had an opportunity to go to school in town, though it was not like a private school, but it was a multiracial school.
Yeah.
And I feel like that really exposed me to a lot of things that are happening out there. A lot of us are not where we want to be because of lack of information. And I'm going to talk about that because today I'm a chartered accountant, but if I tell you that I did not know about the profession until I actually went to varsity, some of you will be shocked.
Yeah.
Because I did not have the information. I did not have a point of reference. The people who I grew up with, at least there were those who were fortunate enough to go and do your engineerings and, all those other things. And because it was only that we knew, or be a teacher because your parents are teachers, then you just sort of like get those options and then you're like, okay, if I weigh my options between a teacher and an engineer, because my elder sister is an engineer, let me go for it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I did. And I applied for engineering in varsity. Until we ran into some technicalities, finance related.
Sure.
So I had to go and stay with my sister who was working in Bloem at the time. So at the time, it was a matter of, you have good results, we saw that. But you can't go to UKZN where you applied because finances, right? So it makes sense for you to go and stay with your sister who already has a place to stay. So then we went to Bloom. At the time, we didn't know that Bloom doesn't offer engineering.
Sure.
So I wake up, go there, and with my results, and I was fortunate enough that I had done both the commercial stream and also physics. So when we get there, they're like, no, we don't have engineering here. But look, your marks are very good. You could qualify for the CA stream.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was just B accounting at the time.
Yeah.
And I went through it, without, the big picture, because again, knowledge. So in my mind, I was like, okay, let me just finish my degree in record time, which was a good goal. And I did finish in record time. And then in third year, I stumbled across another piece of information where they're like, oh, your results are good. You qualify to do what we call CTA. So it's the honors before you do your board exams as a CA. And then I'm like, okay, let me go for it. And then I went for it. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, I did not pass.
Sure.
Because that course in itself, you need to be mentally prepared. And, the normal statistics is that on average, 37% of you pass.
Sure.
So I had to go through the whole thing, look to your left, look to your right. Only one of you is going to make it. That's what we were told the first class.
And how's the pressure during that time?
A lot. It's a lot. Like you feel like you don't even have enough time, right? Because there's so much content that they're pushing down your throat. You are attending most of the day, and then the only option you have to study is at night. And you're always constantly on a catch up. And it really drains you. Physically and also mentally. And unfortunately, some of us, I will say Black people, we don't have information in terms of the things that you can take in order to have more energy and to be always alert, mentally alert. So you cannot compete with your white counterparts because the energy that you need, you are just relying on natural energy, which for that course, unfortunately, is not enough. So I learned that when I failed the first time, right? And I was like, okay, let's regroup. But then again, some of us don't have the privilege to go and repeat things because the reality is that undergrad, I had a bursary, but only from second year. And I will get into another story later on of what transpired in my first year. But anyway, so I got the bursary in third year, which I lost because then I failed, right? So then I cannot go back to school full time.
Sure.
So I had choices to make. So then the only option I had is to start looking for a job. So by the grace of God, and I say grace because there's something that magnificent that happened because I ended up going to train at one of the big 4 firms, which is not, accessible to everyone, right? So at the time, there was one of the big 4 firms, I'm not going to mention names, which just happened to open an academy in the year that I failed, right? And they're like, from now, we are going to take people without these special honors, and you can study part-time while you are working full-time, right? Which came with its pressures. But anyway, what was so beautiful about it is that I pushed in that year and I passed at the end of the year with so much pressure. But then that academy closed down immediately after I passed. And that's why I say it's a grace story. So I just saw, being directed by God in these spaces that I don't really qualify in. Even today, I don't stand up at someone who would say, I was just so intelligent, I was just so good, I just grew up in a good family. Because there are so many other people who tick those boxes, who did not get the opportunity. So that's what transpired. And eventually, I failed another board exam, which at least now I was cushioned because I was still working. I was working. And then I qualified as a chartered accountant. And that's how the story ends. But the midst of the story is full of potholes, bumps.
Yeah.
I think at some point I was depressed. I was just not diagnosed. I did not know about depression, but when I know about depression now,
You're like that.
I
Those are
feel
the
like
signs.
that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my journey, and the story looks so beautiful at the end, but unfortunately, we don't have platforms like this to share the
Information,
hardships
yes.
and all those times when you had suicidal thoughts because things are not going your way. You will never see that. All you see is a lady who seems to be doing well based on what you see on social media and all that. But I just feel like with this platform, I want people to get to know the hardships that happen and also feel that I am not alone. Because I also felt a bit more comfortable in my position, because when I started sharing my story when I was still studying, when I hear a sister says, but that's normal,
Yeah.
then I'm like, okay,
So that means that.
yeah, I can also do it.
Yeah.
So that's really what I want to share with people, to say every beautiful story has its ugly parts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in terms of, okay, I don't want to dwell too much on the ugly parts, but I do believe the ugly parts are actually what makes us what we are today, right? During the time when you were struggling so much, trying to fight for the education that you have, wasn't there like peer pressure, or weren't you feeling like, okay, you know what, maybe, I don't know, along the way challenges that would make you want to give up? How do you keep pushing? Because obviously there has to be something that is on the inside of you which says keep going, even though you know that it's hard.
Of course, peer pressure is there. You're looking at your peers who seem to be doing well. And I remember after I failed my board exam, one of my very close family members, because they could see the agony that I'm going through, they're like, girl, I know you have this dream to become a chartered accountant, but if you look at, you have a degree, you also have an honors, and I look at other accountants who are working where I work, or that I know, they seem to be doing well. So why don't you let it go and just do your thing, and you can buy a nice polo, GTI or
Yeah.
TSI, whatever,
Yeah.
And at that point in time, I became so angry. And I think at some point I resented that person, because I'm like, you don't understand my dream. And for you to now start, trying to make plans, exit plans for me that I did not ask for.
Yeah.
I did not say I want to quit. I just said, ouch, it's painful.
Yes.
So, and in hindsight, I just, with maturity, I got to understand their standpoint. It's very difficult to watch your loved one struggling,
Yeah.
especially if, you could help, or, if you feel like that pain is unnecessary.
Yeah.
And it's like that. Our parents mostly don't understand our dreams, and if they get to support, then that's good. But sometimes they don't understand it enough to support.
Yeah.
So this journey is actually life itself. You need to take the journey by yourself.
Yeah.
You need to be convicted within you, because if you are not, every voice will come and tell you what they think is best for you. And if you don't know who you are, and you have not set the bar for yourself, then everything that people say will go.
Yeah.
Then you just say, oh, maybe they're right. And the next thing you know, 10 years later, you are living a dream that's not even yours.
Yeah.
You can't even recognize yourself. And that's depression 2.0.
Phew.
So for me, it was that peer pressure was there, but I was able to stand my ground because I was already convicted that this is the journey that I need to be taking. And also when I see, the places where doors were opened just for me, that was an indication for me to say, you're on the right path, girl. Just keep going.
Yeah. Okay, I think I'm still on the peer pressure side, right? But we're going to go all the way fast forward to say right now where you are you not feeling any peer pressure? Because obviously we look up to you, right? I look up to you, trust and believe. And I know that so many of us look up to you, especially at home, every time, how every time when somebody does well for themselves. We all celebrate one another. Don't you feel any type of pressure to have to step out of character and be something that you're not because of so many people that are looking up to you?
No.
Okay.
I have conversations with myself. And luckily, I have been informed about when I went on a journey of searching and I found who I am, right? And I knew that nobody else, no exterior thing can ever define me. And that's why I stand in, my being who I am.
Yeah.
So that helps me to say, I don't even look at what other people are doing.
Sure.
I don't, it doesn't bother me that much. And I mean, when it gets to a point where when you are old enough, you get to understand that people will say whatever that they want to say. Some of them have expectations, on your life that you don't have for yourself. The only expectations that I'm going to fulfill are those that I have for my life and what God has for my life, and not what other people think. Of course, peer pressure exists, but if you want to counter that, you need to invest so much in knowing yourself, which I call personal development. You need to get information about who am I, why am I here, where am I going? And once you have that settled, there is no one who can derail you from where you are going. Because in this social media age, everything that you see there on social media is so beautiful. People are buying very nice cars, very nice houses, beautiful relationships. And, for people who don't really know themselves, they will believe everything that they see. And they feel pressured. And all of a sudden, they're no longer content with
what they have.
With what they have and who they are. And they always look at other people and think they have it better than me and I want that. So I just feel like the core of this message is that you need to learn yourself enough so that you are able to stand no matter.
Speaking on learning to know yourself enough, what did it take for you to get to a point where you need to do this? Because I know that it's not everybody, but for some people, it always takes something. There's always going to be that breaking point or that turnaround point where you get you get to a point where you say, listen, I've done this long enough. I'm here now and I'm not looking back. What did it take for you to get here?
Yeah, very interesting question. So for me, it was Mjolo Fontaine, okay? It was Mjolo. There was a time when, I was dating, obviously before I met my husband. These are many years ago. So, and when you are going through these relationships, you just see a cycle. So I'm one person who never used to last beyond 3 months in a relationship because the minute I pick up on red flags,
gone.
I'm gone. I'm a gone girl. Hey? So with this particular one, I forced because at some point in my life, when people started to pick up on this trend of 3 months gone, 3 months gone, I was labeled that I cannot keep her man.
Shoo.
Eh?
And you had a point to prove.
Yes, I had a point to prove, this one I'm going to hold on.
Sure.
It must be more than 3 months, but although I could see this thing is not going anywhere. We are stuck. There's no engine. So I had to go and do some introspection, but it was from a point of hurt. Because I had to, go back, to the drawing board and, find my creator again and say, okay, who am I? Why am I here? Why is this, relationship thing so important in life? And after that, I started reading a lot, trying to educate myself on, how to find yourself, right? And also, what is marriage? All these things. Why am I in relationships? Because I feel like sometimes people are just in relationships for vibes, and you don't know where you are taking this. We are doing it, yes, we are on the path, but where are we going? So I had to go and find out, what is marriage? What is the importance of marriage? How do you know a good marriage when you see it? Because where I grew up,
Hey.
Guys.
Hey.
I did not have role models. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah.
Did not have role models.
Sure.
In fact, I hated marriage. It was that bad.
Yeah.
Throughout my varsity, I did not date because I had really trauma experiences from what I saw around me. And I had to go through a whole process of breaking and forgiveness and releasing and, until I can get to equilibrium.
Sure.
And then I started building from that
Yeah.
by, improving on my knowledge. And then I knew that, okay, marriage maybe is not a bad institution. Just the people who have been doing it, the ones that I know, maybe
Yeah.
are not doing it in the right way, right? And then
Sure.
you start now noticing the good ones. And then when you see the good ones, no matter how far they are,
Sure.
and it resonates with what you have read or what you have educated yourself on, and then it starts making sense, to say, okay, maybe it's not such a bad thing after all. So for me, the breaking point was, relationships that were just not going anywhere. And, you would get, sometimes I would feel like I am losing my mind, over all that. So that pushed me to just go back and say, let's unlearn the toxic things. Okay? Relearn
Yeah.
the good stuff.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I feel like, with us having to speak openly like this, our kids don't have to suffer the same way that we did. Because the information that we have, that we went and worked very hard to get, our kids don't have to work that hard, because we have it like right here in front of them. So going to you studying in varsity and staying away from Jolo, right? Because in as much as we want to stay away from it, I mean, we are here because of somebody had to jolla with somebody. You get what I'm saying? So, but then I want to understand, Mutundi, because with the break that you're taking in between, that's where some of us, we are building relationship goals and everything. Pressure, or you are being left behind. By the time you have this first husband, which is your education, where is the real husband? My sister.
Hey. I wish there was a video that could play out, those moments, my breaking points at that moment. Because I took a break for a good 3-4 years without dating because I have had it. I'm only going to date when I'm about to get married.
Sure.
And obviously you are looking at people, they look like they're in love on the socials.
Yeah.
They're holding hands in malls. Sometimes you just feel like, I wish I could cuddle.
Sabawell. Yeah.
So it was, the pressure was it was hard.
Yeah.
Let me not even downplay it. But there's nothing that is worth having that comes easily.
Sure.
So I had to just encourage myself by, keeping on listening to positive content, and all that, knowing that, having this goal in mind and also trying to prepare myself, because it's one thing to try and to want to get married, but it's another thing to prepare yourself to become a wife.
Sure.
And I feel like a lot of us, there's so much emphasis to, marriage, in terms of a ring. I've seen other people flaunting their rings, which is, there's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
Wedding gowns, beautiful stuff. But that's not what makes marriage. Marriage is something deeper than that. And even after marriage, I realized that these emotions, feely things, butterflies in the tummy, is not what makes marriage.
Sure.
There's a lot that needs to be considered, a lot of choices, a lot of decisions. It's a lot. And if you are not equipped for that institution, it's like you going and saying you want to go and do an engineering job, but you didn't go to school.
Sure.
You don't know how to work these things out.
Yeah.
So it's like that as well. I always say that everything in life is a science. Science is a way of doing things. So there is a way of doing every other thing that you can think of. It's just that we don't give ourselves enough time, or people have not told us that as much as we study for degrees, we need to study all these other things that we want to see happen in our lives.
Sure.
So the pressure was there. Breaking points were there. There was a time when, I just felt, or I just need to drink so that I feel better. It gets to that because you know that at some point you are praying about it and all that, and there's no sign because every time you are looking, okay, maybe it's this one,
This brother here.
yeah,
No, it's not the one.
know, it's not the one. Red flags all over.
Yeah.
It's a page full of red.
Sure.
And you're like, but when is this one coming? And before you know it, in the most oddest places, very odd ways, then you meet your person.
Yeah.
And once that happens, you forget all the pain that you went through, and it's just a whole new heaven on earth.
Sure. The reason why for me it's so important that we speak about the education part first before we could get to the marriage part is because there's a video that I once saw, and it disturbed me so much, where somebody was saying that apparently educated women don't last in marriages. And the reason why they don't last in marriages is because they take their education home with them. You're a CEO at your job, then you want to get home, you want to be a CEO in your house. That's the reason why a lot of marriages are not working out these days. How do you become an employee at your job, a boss at your job or at your company, and then how do you separate the two? Because remember, you did a whole lot of studying for both.
That's a very good question. Yeah.
Yeah.
So first of all, if you are a person and you feel like you need to act in a certain way at certain places, then there's something wrong with you.
Okay.
And you're making things difficult for yourself. And that's where self-sabotage comes in.
Sure.
I am one mutondi. I have one character.
Okay.
My speech, when I talk wherever I am, if I am required to talk in different places, let's say in a professional environment, in a family gathering or wherever, my speech needs to be the same. I don't need to think about, now I need to switch off and become this person. And this is where a lot of people get it wrong. And I'm sorry to say this, but also people at church, they perform. People can perform in church because they think you want to see this certain portrayal of Christianity. And we can smell fake plastic
My
from
sister,
very far.
our last episode, somebody said about the fake and people are not happy with her. You want to trend?
Oh, no. Not me. I don't want to trend.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, but I'm just saying that the minute you have to switch roles, you are acting. It's like this is another movie and then the other one is a movie. So I am Mutondi through and through.
Sure.
If you go to my family and you ask them who Mutondi is, it's probably the same person that my husband is going to describe. Okay. It's probably the same person that my colleagues are going to describe. Okay. Because that makes things easier for me. Then you don't have to over duplicate effort. Because now when I'm in the boardroom, I have to, I don't know how people do it in the boardroom, the way that they don't do it at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, but maybe, also having a spouse who understands who you are, someone who fell in love with who you are and not what you advertised to them. Because maybe that's the starting point.
Sure.
To say, if you have advertised that I at home, I am this thing that you can walk all over and all that, I will only exercise my education at work. Imagine how much work that is for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Because you have to switch characters all the time.
Exactly. And these things can coexist, these things can overlap. The same skills that I use in my work, I can use in my home. If you're saying I am an accountant at work, and therefore when I come and do my finances at home, I must take off that hat and pretend I don't know the things that I know so that I can fit into the home environment, then there's something wrong there. So for me, the take home is you need to work on your character to be consistent everywhere you are. That is a serious life hack.
Sure.
Then you won't have to pretend. You won't have to forget when you are in the midst of other people and say, I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have acted like that. If you're a person who drinks, You don't need to hide it from your colleagues. You don't need to hide it at home. You are just that person.
I'm
And that's
hearing you
it.
very well.
And I'm not promoting that people
Sure.
should drink, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying that it works much better when you have one character that you
Throughout.
take everywhere you go.
Instead of having a whole, I'm hearing you
Yeah.
very, very well, sis. I hear you. And I know that it's a lot of work. It's the same as lying. You know, if you're a liar, you always have to have more lies to cover up for the lies you've told previously.
Exactly.
And also when you're acting, you know, there's this character that I must show you to say, listen, I'm this perfect person, but when I go to the next person, you know, I'm vulnerable and I'm this and that. It's a lot of work, you know. But I want us to talk about intimidation, right? But before we get to the intimidation part, I just want you guys to remember that we are shooting at Scent Studios. Shout out to Pastor Bay and Diwuti. That's good. Yeah, so I want us to talk about the intimidation part, to say when you are doing so well for yourself, you know, let's say before you even met your husband, right? Don't you walk in spaces where people, especially men, feel intimidated by you? And isn't that, because I really want us to get to the part where we are encouraging people to say, should you study and stop, or should you go all the way?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a powerful question as well. And again, I have stories for days because I've been through it. Hey,
My sister, we have time. You have stories, we have time.
yo, yeah. So the intimidation is real, and for me, you know, there will be people who warn me in my circles that, you know, shine, but not too bright.
Right. Yo.
Yeah, dim it, slow it down. You are going too fast. Because you are not going to be a marriage candidate. I was even told that whatever husband I'm waiting for doesn't exist.
Ha!
Yes.
Is this one a ghost?
Yeah.
Brother, are you a ghost?
Shout out to my husband, guys.
Sure.
Yeah.
He does exist.
He
does.
exists, yes.
Yes. So the one that you're waiting for actually does
He
exist.
does exist. The one that you believe that you should have
Yes.
does exist.
So-
Yeah, so it's real. You know, you hear it all the time, because also people who are at maybe my level, the male counterparts,
Sure.
look at people who have, you know, achieved less, if I can put it
Sure.
like that. It's either someone on the same level or below,
Yes.
you know. I don't know what is the rationale behind that, maybe for control purposes. I don't know. You know, so you get to a point where you really realize that this pond is becoming smaller and smaller. And you even wonder if there's any fish in this small, very small pond. So it's very important to be anchored in what you believe in.
Yeah.
Because for me, if my friend told me that the man you're waiting for doesn't exist, of course I was tempted to say, okay, maybe I should
Lower your
you know,
standards.
lower my standards, lower the bar a little bit. And I think I would have seen flames, lots of flames.
You are going to be a mediocre. You know what's mediocre? My
Yeah.
sister, you are going to be, hey.
Yes. And it's depressing to be who you are not, to be lower than what you are called to do. Because you always need to constantly remind yourself, okay, I need to suppress this. If I have a big dream, no, I need to make it smaller. Have you ever been squeezed inside I don't know, like suffocating?
Yes.
There's no way you're going to survive that. You know, so that's where depression comes in. So you need to be anchored in, it goes back to what I said, that if you know yourself and where you are going, then people who are going to say things along the way are not going to disturb you from where you are going. Because people talk. Unfortunately, one of those things that God gave people for free is a mouth. That
Free
can
of charge.
say anything.
Anytime.
It says anything.
Yeah.
You know, and some of those things might be directed to you. So it's up to you on how you then react to it. So for me, everything that people say, you know, I always, or whatever problem that I face in life, I always point inwards. Because I know that the control that I need to have in this situation comes from me. It doesn't come from me telling people, no, stop saying that, stop doing that to me, stop whatever. You know, I need to be the one who has the power and take my control back. If I say what you are telling me is not true, then I've already defeated whatever that sentence you said. Yeah. And sometimes you need to normalize when someone says something negative to you, directly, you say, I reject it.
There and then.
Yes, right there and then. Then you've cancelled it out. It won't even stick in your mind, you know, because people say a lot of wrong things and negative things, you know. So, yeah, so that issue of intimidation and, you know, knowing that the pond is smaller, it's a real pressure. So you need, once you know your problem, it's easier to solve it. So when you can see that, I'm becoming, you know, stressed about this thing, find tools, coping mechanisms that can help you. For some, that's gym. For some, that's reading. For some, that's music. You know, find your ways in which you can, you know, distract yourself from the stress that you are feeling. I don't recommend alcohol, but other people use it
My
anyway.
sister, I'm starting to doubt you. The way you keep going on the alcohol.
Yeah, no, it's a problem. I shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I shouldn't do that.
Forget the alcohol, bazalwane. Forget about the alcohol.
No, we don't need Alcoholics Anonymous. No. We are safe. We're safe. Okay, I will use another example.
Yes.
Yeah, but, you know, use constructive things, you know, that can help you to distract yourself from the stress.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Sure. One other thing that I don't know if people know this about you, but you speak at events, you know. You are for women. And in most cases, when you are for women, you are considered to be against men. Have you ever come across something like that?
Yes, I've come across it a lot of times. And I feel like, you know, we have been told a lie so many times that we've started believing it. You know, so, and when we grew up, typically in whatever gathering or in church or whatever, it was mostly men who would speak, right? So people take things that come from men easier than when it comes from a woman.
Sure.
So even if I'm a woman and I'm telling them the truth, for them to believe it, if a man comes and says exactly the same thing that I said, you will hear, oh, hallelujah, because they are telling the truth. And these are battles that, I mean, when you are in leadership like myself, you fight these battles all the time. I remember I once caused chaos there at my workplace because during a meeting, I said something, you know, a resolution. I was like, no, we could do this, and that. And then a minute later, no, they dismissed me. And then a minute later, a guy comes and says exactly the same thing that I said. And then like, yeah, he's
that's
right.
the one.
I'm like, no, not yet. That is exactly what I said.
And you said no.
Yes, I said no. And people have this tendency of men, they like interpreting what you said. So if I said a sentence, they're like, yeah, she means this, and that. And I had to tell them right there, no, I don't need an interpreter.
You said what you said.
I said what I said, and you need to understand what I'm saying. It doesn't matter whether it's a male voice or a female voice. So you need to get used to this voice because it is here to stay. Because I was the only female where I was working. So they were not used to a female voice having authority. So I had to like teach them, you know, very quickly. So it's true that even wherever we go in these social, you know, streets or whatever, when a woman comes and says, I'm advocating for other women, they automatically think you are against men. And that is not the case. We are just reflecting on how things are right now, and we want to improve our lives going forward, because for the longest time, women have been oppressed and they're not even aware of it.
Sure.
And I know you said we're going to pack the marriage thing, but I always have this discussion with my husband, you know, to just make him aware of certain things that happen. You know, typically if we make an example of if the child is sick, who bears the biggest responsibility?
You.
It must be a woman. And sometimes it's only because the child wants the mother.
The mother, yeah.
Right? And all the other things like cooking, you know, that rests, you know, solely on women.
Yeah.
Right? But now things have changed. Women are also in boardrooms.
Sure.
We are working, you know, and we are making decisions wherever we are. And in the household, things have not changed. It's like you've taken off the load financially from the men, which comes with the stress, right? You have halved it, but then you are taking on a higher baggage while you are leaving the other person with much less.
Yeah.
So we need to start talking about these things. And by talking about them, we're not saying we are against men. We're just saying, let us have a common understanding. Let's open up that engagement so that we can find solutions. I don't have solutions, but I know that sometimes it's very painful to know that you have these many responsibilities, but then also you need to also deliver at work.
Yeah.
And I think we need to start those engagements. I am for women, but also I am for men.
Yeah.
But it's just that thing of if a child has 2 toys and there's a relative who has nothing and he came to visit, what do? You
balance it out.
balance it out.
Yeah.
So that's what we are doing.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think we still have a long way to go as women, because every time, like you are saying, that when one person says one thing, it turns around and it's like, okay, no, this one is anti, and you hate and you this and you that. But then how do you then, in your personal space, handle that pressure? I don't know if maybe you have been to my level. Mine is extreme in terms of me having to deal with the tongue lash, okay? But I would like to believe that because you're also out there, from time to time, you have to come across things like that. How do you then address such issues?
So for me, I introspect a lot. And most of the time, I will try to find out, is it the way that I said it that makes people misunderstand what I'm saying? Because sometimes you might be saying the right thing, but saying it in the wrong way. And the message is missed altogether because of the approach that you have taken in saying it, So there is always, you need to know your audience, to say, when I'm talking at a funeral, it's different from when I'm at a women's conference. So I need to know the way in which I need to address this group of people and then switch up gears when I go and speak to, the youth, because those ones are more energetic. So I think for me, it's mostly the approach, but with that being said, there are people who are just downright haters.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that you're going to do in this world that will ever please them.
Yeah.
And we need to be comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I think if you ever take up a courageous role in leadership or whatever, just know that you're never going to please everyone at the same time.
Sure.
There will be people who will be against you, maybe because they just don't like how you look.
Yeah.
You are too dark for their liking.
You're too loud.
You are too loud. Your smile, I don't like it.
Yeah, it's too wide.
Yeah, you are laughing. You are laughing
Why
too
are you
much.
laughing?
Why are you laughing? So we cannot, resist that, and we cannot solve that. So for me, it's like, what I can fix, I will fix.
Yeah.
But you still get me as a package. I am not going to downplay my character just because you are uncomfortable, unfortunately.
There's one thing that I forgot to ask you, Mudondine, regarding being in a corporate space. You're a woman in a room full of men. And to a certain degree, they don't believe that you actually made it up there on merit. To a certain degree, you must have slept your way to the top. How does that make... I don't even want to... Actually, I'm going to assume that every woman who is climbing up the ladder goes through that to a certain degree. How does that affect you and your performance and how you handle yourself and you carry yourself in a workplace? In a workplace?
Yeah, so I think on that one, time is always the best thing that will tell the full story of whatever. When I went to the current job where I am now, there were a lot of accusations. You are there, you are young, and you seem to be doing very well. People will even go behind your back to find out how much you're earning, and all those things. Just because you are a woman. But for men who are the same age as you, people are not surprised why they're at that level. So those things will always be there. And those rumors, they did happen to me. And I found out much later because, when people gossip, they don't tell you.
Yeah.
They tell everyone else. And you just hear it later on when you're talking to someone. And then they're like, yeah, Pella Wena, don't forget that A, B, C, and D, actually, your relationship with Mang Mang, And you're like, hi, Bo.
whole
learning,
me.
I'm learning new things about myself now. So it does happen. But for me, I'm like, if you know yourself, for me, just do the best to live peaceably with everyone and be the best version of yourself. You won't have to extinguish any rumors. Allow people to talk. I'm sure even now people are talking.
Yeah.
Do I care? No.
Nope.
People go to extents where, they will say, after my dad's passing, that's another topic now, when you start buying cars and whatever, they're like, yeah, no, it's the
money has
it's
come
the
out.
money has come out, and if we tell you really that we didn't get anything, you will now, what are you going to say? So people talk. And sometimes it's just boredom. This is something that I heard from my husband taught me that, when you meet people or you are in spaces where people are just talking, sometimes they're just trying to make conversation. Like if someone comes and greets you, hello, yeah, you've gained weight. That's an unnecessary statement.
Yes.
So my husband taught me that they're just trying to make conversation. Hey, it's nothing serious.
You don't have to take out your gloves.
Don't take it home. No.
Don't pumasilo at them.
No.
Yeah.
Don't take it to another level.
Yeah.
It's fine. They're just bored. And these are things that if you think of the village context, there are so many people who are gathering in, funerals and they don't know what to talk about. And then they will start, they just
Mutondi.
throw a name. Yeah, Mutondi. They're like, I heard she's dating Mangma. She's dating. Like, you'll be shocked. They just see you. I remember when I was in high school, someone gave me a lift. I was in matric and, I used to go to a town school, right? And I needed lifts, right? Someone gives me a lift and then a month later in the village, no, she's dating that guy. Hi, Bo.
Just because of a
When?
lift.
Just because of a lift.
Yeah.
People are bored and they just find things to occupy their time. That's all that's happening. There's no bearing on the quality of a person that you are. It's them, not you.
Sure. Yeah, ne. Mutondi, there was a topic nyana that we had before we started, right? Regarding a trending video. I was very honest with you and I told you the video that I saw which was trending annoyed me. Even in my response, a lot of people were not happy with me because my attitude on that video, I don't want to lie to you, I was really annoyed. Where a lady who has done so well for herself, right? And she has not met anyone, somebody who's a companion, somebody to share life with. And she was crying on the social media platforms. She's like, I have everything. I can go on vacation any day, but I don't have a life partner to share all of these things with. In my response, obviously annoyed and also thinking, it's very much possible for you to be lonely when you're in a relationship, So for you to want to say you are lonely, therefore you need somebody next to you, that just go for therapy and deal with your loneliness. Then when the companion comes, that person will come. And after that, I saw a lot of people getting, especially younger girls, right, getting that video. That video was being shared, with them to say, listen, you're going to end up like her. What is the danger of education or the danger of lack of knowledge to our young girls who are trying so hard to work as hard as we are working, but at the same time, they have all this negativity that is being thrown at them?
It's very dangerous. The social media is, there are positives there, and a lot of times there's less positives and more negatives, right? So going back to the video that you are talking about, I also watched that video and I was like, I don't know what this lady is going through, but well, maybe there's merit to her story.
Sure.
But the fact of the matter is, if you are not happy by yourself, that's why I advocate on working on yourself. If you are not happy by yourself, you are just carrying problems and putting them into the relationship. The relationship is not going to be any better. So for me, instead of focusing on, oh my gosh, I don't have a partner, I don't have this, work on yourself. And I promise you, you will be so content. You'll be so content. And maybe something that gets you to that point is because you have surrounded yourself by people who always think that having a boyfriend is everything.
Sure.
Or having a husband is everything. Maybe change your circle.
Yeah.
I always say, audit your circle every year if possible.
Sure.
Audit your circle if they are feeding you things that make you feel another way. It's time to move back a little bit and maybe hang out with like-minded people. And whatever that you do in this life, always keep on the positive side. I don't care how bad something is. And I have learned that we can all support, we can all come up with reasons why something is so bad. You might think your life is bad right now, right? There's someone who has 10 times the money that you have, but they think their life is bad.
Yeah.
Similarly, there's someone who is doing, a bit worse than you, and they think their life is bad. And when you go and listen to their stories, you will sympathize with them. Or no, but it makes sense. I understand why you are depressed. I understand, but there's no rewards in that.
Yeah.
There's no rewards, so you need to always keep on the positive side. If you are that person who now feels like, no, I need to stop, growing professionally because I need a man, you are just creating problems for yourself. That relationship is going to come along and it will not fulfill you because you are not fulfilled yourself.
Bars, okay?
Yeah.
The one last thing that I would love us to touch on is the issue of parenthood when you are a working mom, a wife mom, right? Because apparently when we are now working so hard, we are lazy, my sister. Apparently we are lazy. Yeah?
Yeah.
It's like ngachivenda vari ritonga riko vana vatonga maiva. It's like 1 or 2. Maximum is 2.
Yeah.
1 or 2. Are we really lazy? We don't want to reproduce, or what's the issue with us working women and reproduction?
Yeah, no, reproduction, be fruitful and multiply. We'll multiply in other ways.
Sure.
We are not lazy, right? I grew up in a family of 5 siblings. And honestly speaking, I don't know, I could have eliminated, but I feel like if my parents, slowed down a bit, our quality of life would have been much better.
Sure.
Because it's not only financially, okay? Financially is very important because your kids have to have a good, comfortable upbringing, right? But then it's also time. And when we grew up, our fathers seldom had time for us.
So it was only on the mother.
It was only on the mother. And you can see with so many broken women or broken kids that are out there, a guy needs the father to be around. Also, a lady needs the father to be around, So in order to balance the equation, you need to have time for your kids. You can't just keep popping them and then you just leave them. They're not, chickens, where you just let them wander around. No, these are people. These are souls. These are people who are going to bear, another generation. And if you get it wrong in this generation, so it means so many other generations get affected. So we are not lazy. We are just trying to balance out the equation so that we can also allocate time to the kids that we have while also chasing our purpose and our dreams, So I don't think, honestly, let's keep it at 2-3, so that,
For management purposes.
For management
control.
purposes, because we can't buy a whole bus just because we want to travel from Joburg to Durban. Come on, so let's keep it there.
Mutondi, there's a story that I'm covering right now, right, of a guy who, I'm not going to dwell too much on the guy, but the guy has been raping a child who's 15 years old. The guy was dating the mother of that child. But the mother is 40 years old and she's got 6 children, right?
Wow.
And obviously that means that the one that she's we don't know how many other children she's pimping out, because the one that was being raped by this guy is the third born, and she's the one who was actually taking care of the siblings while the mother was wandering the streets, And for me, I feel like the number of kids that I have, oh my goodness, in as much as I feel like I can have more, but I feel like my relationship with them, it's so intimate because they are so minimal. There are not a lot of them. Do you feel like maybe because we were born in families where we are more than 2 or the 3, maybe the attention that we could have got maybe a little more than what we got. And also the issues like your postnatal depression and all the things that parents go through all on their own because, the dads are wandering the streets somewhere. Do you feel like that is one of the issues that is affecting our society today? Because remember, you had to do the work by yourself. Nobody held your hand for you to do the work. You had to make a conscious decision that I want to do the work to heal everything. And I do believe that when you're healing from whatever, in as much as a lot of things are triggered by mjolo, I mean, we have middle child issues. We have these upbringing issues. We have this, we have that. Do you feel like if the number is minimized, the risk of also pimping kids out and also, because remember the time you're giving birth, your peers are going to school. But then now, your peers are taking kids to varsity. You're only studying to buy nappies. How's that?
Yeah, so that is a problem. Having too many kids than you can take care of. You only have two hands. And if you have a husband, he also has two hands. And if all of your hands are full, then it means there's someone who's going to get neglected. There's going to be a casualty there. So like you are saying, when women had to sell their dreams because they had to take care of kids, a lot of them had to live, below the line of their dreams. They sacrificed a lot, for these marriages to work, for their kids to at least get the bare minimum of attention.
Yeah.
While the male counterparts were maybe, even if he's an honest man, maybe he's at work, working for the money and all that. And I always say that men should never take the credit, if they've done well in business and say, yeah, I built this thing from the ground up. It's because someone was taking care of your other responsibilities. If there was no woman who was taking care of your kids and making sure that you are fed, making sure that your clothes are ironed and whatever, it would have been a different story. So we need to be gracious as women to ourselves. And this is a journey for me that was very painful. I was also sharing with you that, being a mother is one of the things that have tested me to the core. Because throughout this whole parenting thing, firstly, being pregnant, when you are pregnant, you have to pause on a lot of dreams, a lot of things, and wait to give birth. Only to find that when you give birth, actually, this is when the work begins.
When you are thinking you're pausing and then after that it's back to normal.
Exactly.
This is the new normal.
No, this is the new normal. Now you no longer have time for yourself and all that. So being a mother is a job on its own.
Yeah.
And I feel like if I knew this before I became a chartered accountant like women back then, I would have chosen to be a housewife because it's a job on its own. But now we are here. So we are not saying others should sacrifice their dreams so that others can shine. We are saying let's both pursue our dreams.
Sure.
But we just need to meet each other halfway. So the mothering experience is one of the greatest challenges out there, and people don't appreciate that, a lot. The healing that needs to take place. The hormone imbalance, your skin reacts. Your body is something that you have never met before in your life. And you think you're going to go back to normal. Sure. And then it doesn't happen. And that's another depression, 3.0 now.
Yo.
So, and you did say that postnatal depression is a thing. It happens. And you need to always, I made a conscious decision that I don't want to fall into that. If I can help it, I need to. So I always self-regulate. I need to make sure that I am fine. If I am not getting enough sleep, I am so grateful for my husband because he's very supportive. If I say tonight I'm not gonna wake up, actually he'll volunteer to say, no, I can see you're exhausted. Please just prepare the bottle and then at night when the baby wakes up, I will feed him.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the partnerships that we need, so that both of us can thrive because one cannot succeed at the expense of another. There are so many women in psychiatric hospitals right now. And unfortunately, it's not their doing. It's things that have happened to them, but they were not self-aware enough. They did not know that they have the power. And the way that you would have received marriage advice before, right?
Sure.
I did. And some of that advice I had, because I knew my standards, right? Before that, I had to like filter and say that I'm not taking. This I'm not, that is just a recipe for disaster. Because I have looked at y'all's marriages.
The ones
you
who are
guys
giving
who
you
are
advice.
giving me advice. And I don't like it. I'm
That's
just
a
not going to
fact.
tell you, but I don't like it. You know, so I am not going to take such advice. So you need, when you have the basis, then you are able to make those kinds of decisions. But for women who did not have that basis, when you are told that a woman gets angry from here
my
upwards,
sister.
you know, you take it as it is. When they say that, you know, at 12 midnight, when your husband comes back, you don't ask him where he comes from. You just take it, you know, because you think that is marriage. But we need to be able to challenge the narrative. I am one child that was, okay, I'm not a child anymore, but I was a very troublesome child because my parents, grandparents, if they tell me what to do, I would ask why. Why? It's culture. Where did it come from?
Who started it?
Who started it? Yeah, because that person must come and explain to me why we are doing this. There must be a valid reason why we are doing this. If I don't understand it, unfortunately, I will not do it.
Amen.
And I think people need to apply this also in churches. Do not do things that you don't understand. You know, so and that's where a lot of people get trapped. We can translate it to all many other spheres of life, actually. Yeah.
Sure.
I think I've answered your question and just added more.
And the future questions.
Thank you.
All the questions that I had, you have answered that. All right. With that being said, thank you so much, guys. We're recording live. Your Kanye will not leave me alone, Bazalwani. There's Kanye I'm always complaining about at this Send Studio. She will not leave me alone if I don't mention that we are recording live from Send Studios. So I want to thank Send Studios for hosting us once again. These are permanent residents, all right? We'll see you guys on the next one. From myself and my beautiful guest and my sister Mutondi, I love you so much, sis.
I love you
appreciate
too.
you. God bless you. Mwah.